Tessa Thompson has spent over 2 decades becoming other people. Boxers' girlfriends, Asgardian warriors, Harlem Renaissance women passing for white.
And he would often use me as his subject. He would test light and try tricks on his camera with the Super 8 or with tape or then.
The characters she has inhabited stretch across genres, decades, and entirely different worlds. But the woman constructing all of these performances has remained, by her own design, carefully and deliberately out of reach. There are 2 things about Tessa Thompson that most people do not know. And the second one will permanently change how you watch everything she has ever done.
I just remember the sensation of like looking down at the nipple, but wondering if I should move that or if I should stay in the tableau. And I stayed in that tableau, you know?
She was born on October 3rd, 1983 in Los Angeles to musician Mark Anthony Thompson. She was raised between Hollywood and Brooklyn. Before she could fully read, her father was already placing her in front of a camera. Not as a performer, but as a subject. He used her to test light, adjust exposures, and experiment with Super 8 film, tape, and early digital formats. She stood under those lights as a small child and learned something that most people spend a lifetime trying to understand. Being watched and being seen are not the same thing. The first real proof of what she was becoming happened during a children's production of Antigone. She was 6 or 7 years old, assigned to stand silently as a background Greek goddess. Her mother had sewn her a toga. During the performance, that toga slipped, in front of an audience. Her body was partially exposed. She looked down, she registered what had happened, and then she made a decision. She did not move, she did not fix it. She held the tableau completely still until the moment passed. The performance, she had already decided, mattered more than the person inside it. That decision, made by a child on a small stage, planted something in her that would drive every role she would ever take. Her parents raised her with one unusual freedom. Neither of them ever dressed her.
So there's early photographs of me in like one of my dad's oversized t-shirts and then a belt that I would cinch at the waist and that became a dress. Or later I would borrow all this vintage jewelry from my mother.
From the time she could walk, Tessa rated both closets equally. She cinched her father's oversized t-shirts with belts and turned them into dresses. She layered her mother's vintage jewelry until her small arms could barely carry the weight. When her father returned from Paris with a boy's tweed suit and green suspenders, she loved them specifically because they felt like a costume, like a disguise. Fashion was never about appearance. It was about constructing an identity from scratch every single morning. When she went to school wearing lace-up boots, other students called her Granny Grip. Her mother pulled her out immediately. No negotiations, no waiting for things to improve. That response gave Tessa a framework she would carry for the rest of her life. When a space does not honor who you are, you do not adjust yourself to fit it. Now you leave. At Santa Monica High School, a campus of 4,000 students where racial groups moved in separate, silent territories, Tessa was 17 years old when she organized something most adults never attempt.
We got basically 100 students together to talk about race. And it was 20 students from, at that point, I don't know how we define race now in the United States, but at that point there were like 5 main racial groups. So people that identified or were any of those racial groups, we had 20 from each group.
100 students, 5 racial groups, 20 from each. They wrote stereotypes on boards anonymously. They confronted those perceptions in the open. They spent a full weekend sleeping at the school, having conversations that most adults avoid entirely. She organized all of it at 17. She had no plans to act professionally. She enrolled at Santa Monica College to study cultural anthropology, driven by a fascination with why human beings behave the way they do. She imagined herself writing ethnographies in the field. Then, on a whim, she walked into a Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company workshop.
I was just there studying linguistics. I didn't think I was studying acting. But I suddenly was so struck because I had read Shakespeare in high school, I'd seen it in high school, and I had performed it in high school. I didn't know what it meant, any of it.
The workshop used a technique called dropping in, where instructors stood behind actors and whispered memory prompts. Each prompt infused the lines with personal meaning. Shakespeare, which she had performed without understanding, suddenly became completely clear. It was not magic, it was craft, and craft could be learned. She began mopping floors and running errands for that company just to stay close to the work. Then, during a crucial reading, the lead actress got stuck in San Francisco traffic and could not make it.
She was late, she wasn't gonna make it. And so they were like, I was literally like mopping, and they were like, you, get in here. And that was my first time really acting with the company.
That accidental debut led to formal training. She studied Meisner technique, which delivered the most important lesson of her early career. Stop focusing on what you are doing. Start responding to who you are with. Listening, she discovered, produces more truth than speaking. Veronica Mars gave her her first real on-screen training ground, where she watched Kristen Bell execute technical precision alongside emotional authenticity. Dear White People gave her Samantha White, the first character she played who functioned as the subject of a narrative rather than simply its object. Then Ryan Coogler offered her Creed.
Met with him and had conversations around Bianca. So much that became a part of the texture of that character was not in it. We've sort of found all that together.
Coogler did not simply hand her a script. He recorded Tessa and Michael B. Jordan improvising together, then worked their discoveries into what they would eventually shoot. He asked about Bianca's zodiac sign, her childhood school, her deepest fears. Tessa learned American Sign Language for the role. She spent time in Philadelphia barbershops and nail salons until the city's rhythms became her own.
I remember walking around with Sly and someone being like, yo, Sly, you forgot about Philly, man. And he's like, I'm not even from Philadelphia. But like, when you make those films, you feel like you are, because the community really invites you in. It means so much to them, and it meant so much to us.
The Creed trilogy would span 10 years of her life. Bianca moved from emerging artist to wife to mother across that decade, her hearing loss progressing as her strength deepened. Taika Waititi then called about Thor, Ragnarok. The experience did not frighten her because of the action sequences or the scale of the production. It frightened her because of the pure imagination the work required. She watched Chris Hemsworth operate with complete absence of self-consciousness.
Chris Hemsworth is also like it's like a baby with muscles, you know? That's like a very big infant who eats every hour, you know? Like, that's a hungry child.
She watched Tom Hiddleston memorize every CGI set placement so he could picture exactly what audiences would eventually see. That environment unlocked something in her understanding of comedy, which she traced back directly to Lucille Ball.
I remember when I then got really into Lucille Ball and trying to understand her. She's one of the greatest comedians of all time. She said this thing that I'm not funny, what I am is brave. And I think that it does require this kind of bravery to make a fool out of yourself and to act from a place of a lack of dignity, actually.
Valkyrie became the first LGBTQ plus character she portrayed in a major franchise. Marvel attempted to edit out the character's queerness entirely. Tessa fought to preserve it, even in glances and subtext. In June 2018, she stated publicly, "I'm attracted to men and also to women." She described her connection to Janelle Monáe as two people vibrating on the same frequency. The internet responded with demands for labels and categories. Tessa refused every single one.
I'm not sure that it changes my relationship to myself necessarily, but I just think that sometimes gender hems us in, this idea of how we should behave or how we should dress. I sometimes think that we would do things differently were we not so concerned about how it lines up with our gender.
Gender and sexuality, to Tessa, functioned as spaces for exploration rather than boundaries for confinement. She once tucked all of her hair under a baseball cap and walked through a park as a boy just to feel what moving through space differently meant.
I remember one time going to a park and tucking all of my hair into a baseball cap. It's actually very Shakespearean, and sort of dressing like a boy and going into the park just to see what it felt like to be in this park as a boy.
Boots, Riley gave her complete creative freedom in Sorry to Bother You. Rebecca Hall's adaptation of Nella Larsen's novel Passing asked more of her as a producer than almost any project before it. Studios demanded the film be shot in color. They demanded the white male character be expanded. Hall refused both. Tessa stood beside her without hesitation.
And there were a number of reasons. A, because if we had made the movie in color, we really don't pass. And also because I think so much of the texture of the film, even the aspect ratio, has to do with this sense of like the walls caving in on this woman, Irene, who I play. I just kept saying to her, like, as her collaborator, as her friend, and as her producer now, I'll just stay with you until we can get the funding and make this movie. And eventually we
Passing earned Tessa her first BAFTA nomination for Best Actress in a Leading Role. She founded Viva Maud Productions, named after Harold and Maude, a film that failed commercially before becoming a cult classic 11 years later. She wanted to champion stories that might arrive before the world was ready for them. Naya DaCosta brought her Hedda, an adaptation of Henrik Ibsen's Hedda Gabler, set in 1954, with Hedda as a black woman and one major male role gender-swapped into Eileen.
Nia DaCosta, our brilliant filmmaker, changed one of the roles that typically was played by a man from Eyelit to Eileen. And so then she was like, oops, everyone's gay.
Tessa agreed to the project before reading the script. She and Naya had met 10 years earlier at Sundance Labs, when Naya was 25 and said, "When I make this movie, will you make it with me? Not if, when." Filming took place in a real English manner with strict rules enforced throughout the entire production.
The owners were so gracious and lovely with us. There were a lot of rules, though. You couldn't touch the walls, you couldn't drink water. We had to, all the actors in between scenes had to live basically in this it's where they kept the dog.
Hedda consumed her. She could not separate herself from the character at night. The confinement of the manor, the rules, the restricted spaces, all of it deepened the performance in ways a controlled set never could have. Hedda earned her a 2025 Gotham Award nomination for Outstanding Lead Performance and a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress. Her net worth stands at approximately $4 million, built by consistently choosing meaningful work over maximum paychecks. She has yes tattooed on one arm and no on the other, a reference to Yoko Ono's art piece that first connected Yoko and John Lennon. Tessa Thompson does not believe acting is transformation. She believes it is expansion and reduction, identifying which parts of herself to amplify and which to pull back until a character takes shape. Hedda's cruelty exists in Tessa, and Detroit's wildness exists in Tessa. Bianca's tenderness exists in Tessa. Every character is a different dial setting on the same complex human being. She was never disappearing into roles. Every performance was Tessa Thompson showing pieces of herself she keeps hidden in ordinary life. The violence, the playfulness, the manipulation, the vulnerability, all of it hers, all of it real, all of it always there.